Hi, everybody. This is Blaine DeSantis, and I welcome you to another edition of Books and Looks. Yes, it's our weekly voyage of discovery in the wonderful world of books. Books that I've read and authors that I've interviewed. And today we are talking with Lisa Bailey, a former FBI forensic artist, who's going to be telling us all about this and her life there in her book, Clay and Bones. One of the most amazing book covers I've had and seen in a long time. It's a great story. It's about her life. It's about being a forensic artist. And to be very honest with you, it's also about what goes on there at the FBI and the discrimination that she faced, along with many others, what goes on. I'm going to tell you what, this is a book, this is an eye-opener. And you want to read this book, but to get you ready for reading it, let's go right to that interview with Lisa Bailey. Lisa, welcome to Books and Looks.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Glad to have you here. She's calling friends from sunny Portugal right now.
Yep, it's beautiful. It's beautiful here.
Beautiful. Good.
Yep.
Wow. Well, this is a challenge for us. We never know where we're going to be recording, who's where or what, but it's working, and that's all we care about. So good to have you on. Now, I usually start out by getting into a person's background, but this is a memoir. And so this whole book is your background, basically. So I'm going to just dip right on in, if you don't mind. And why write this book? And why write this book at this time?
I never would have written a book if I had had a quote unquote normal career where I didn't have the bullying and the harassment and all that. I mean, I planned on staying at the bureau till 62 to retire. And if I had just been able to have my normal career and retire quietly, I would have been, well, I had a great career and I'm done now. But everything that happened, and I just had a very bad years-long experience with discrimination and reprisal um, for reporting the harassment and everything. That just what happened was beyond the pale. And when I retired earlier than I anticipated, but kind of for my own, um, it's just kind of to save myself, I retired. Um, I could not stop thinking about what happened, and it made me angry. And I just thought I didn't want to write it out of a place of anger, but I needed to speak up because the FBI, I know discrimination happens everywhere, but the FBI is supposed to prosecute things like that. So, that's the last place it should be happening. So that's really what instigated it, is just waking up in the middle of the night, just thinking, how dare they? But yeah, I did not want it to be written from a place of anger, and I don't think it is. I was able to step back and I think kind of report on it pretty clearly as far as what happened.
Now, friends, I'm going to be showing you the cover of the book. Again, it's called Clay and Bones. I think this wins the title of the best cover of the year. I don't know if they make such a thing, but this is an amazing. You see this, you're never going to forget it, friends. It's Clay and Bones. It's Lisa's story about working with the FBI as a forensic artist, which is a spectacular job. It would have been even better had we not had some of the issues. But before I get, one of the things I see here as I look at this, look at the cover, what are all these white things sticking out here, and why do you need those? What are all the white things on the skull? There are all these things there. What are those?
Those are just little erasers. Those are tissue depth markers that we use as a guideline for how much clay to add to the skull. So how they were gathered in the past, they were gathered by actually sticking needles in cadavers and then measuring how thick the skin was. And the way the FBI gathered their tissue depth tables is they had hundreds of CT scans of living individuals for this project. So those, like when you see a long tissue depth marker here along the jawline, it's on the edge, it's an average, say, of 18 millimeters. But, you can account for, you need to account for the skull structure. And if you know possibly the stature or the weight of the person. So those are just averages to give us an idea. So we don't go and put way more than would be anatomically possible on a part of the skull.
We're gonna learn a lot about this, friends. We're gonna learn a lot. This
Yes.
is a fascinating,
I can talk skulls all day. I can talk skulls all day.
fascinating
And the
subject.
one thing, if I can mention, the reason I love that skull on the cover, the credit is on the inside cover of the book. I found it on Instagram, and if you can see some pencil markings on the skull. So that skull was actually used as a teaching tool for facial approximation because I recognize those little pencil marks. So when you see that on the cover, like you can see next to the nasal aperture, there's like a little pencil mark, and you're not supposed to write on the skull, but that's a teaching skull. So I just thought it was a beautiful skull.
Looks good to me, I tell you. Well, okay. Well, now you worked at the FBI. Now you wrote your book about your time there. Some of the cases you worked on, talked about, forensic anatomy, talked about the discrimination, everything else. Did you have to get clearance from the FBI to write this book, or to write about certain parts of this book?
They have to, they review it, and they review it for anything that might possibly be classified or sensitive. And so, yes, I did have to submit it to the review board, which took forever, but I won't have it took forever. I think they were personally, I think they were unhappy with what I wrote, but there were portions that they tried to redact.
Okay. That's good. That's good to know. That's good to know, because I can't imagine they'd be very happy with you exposing all the morons who worked there, who made your life a living hell while you were there. So, but wow. Well, anyway, now you grew up in Dover, Delaware, home of the Monster Mile. Oh, I spent many a lousy hour waiting to get into that track. I'll tell you what, I used to go to all the NASCAR races there. God almighty. We left at 6 in the morning from Reading, Pennsylvania, and we still weren't in the track at 1 in the afternoon. I mean, it was, ugh. But you weren't involved with that. You were involved with the Air Force Base. Tell us a little bit about you and your family. Your dad, I think, was at the Air Force Base. I think all you guys got involved in the military. Tell us a bit about that.
So my mom actually was in the Women's Army Air Corps. That's what it was called back then in the 50s. My dad was 26 years in the Air Force. So he was a jet engine mechanic, and that's when he got stationed there. That's when I guess they were transitioning Dover Air Force Base to be a C-5. That's a C-5 airplane, and he was a jet engine mechanic for C-5s. My oldest brother and my sister were in the Air Force. I had another brother who was in the Marines, and there was really not much there in Dover, Delaware at the time. I mean, now they have a bit more. They have a casino, if you want to work at a casino, but the military was just a natural progression for me. And it was a way for me to get some college benefits and see the world. And so I chose the Navy. I thought they had the cutest uniforms. I was 18.
There you go. Wow. So you enlisted in the Navy.
I enlisted the Navy as a Russian linguist.
Ah, but did you know Russian when you enlisted in the Navy?
No, no, they send you to school and they pound it into your head. And the this is gonna sound how it's gonna sound. I didn't think it was that difficult to learn. It's a very organized language. There's 32 letters. They're different. They're in Cyrillic, so they're not, ABC like we have. So you need to learn the different alphabet. Um, so the first year of school was at the Defense Language Institute in Monterey, California, which was beautiful. So we spent an entire year there learning Russian. And then at Goodfellow Air Force Base, we got more into the technical Russian, the military terminology. So it was a year and 4 months of schooling.
So were you a spy, or were you getting spy? How what did you do then for I'm confused.
Well, I can say that, countries listen to each other. So I would have a tape that I would listen to and transcribe. So I can say that much, which, everybody knows. I mean, everybody knows everybody's spying on each other. So I no, I was not a spy. I was a translator, essentially. So not in real time, but with tapes.
Were you stationed over near Russia?
No, 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 no. At one point there was, because everybody, all of us, when I was stationed in Spain, we all wanted to go visit. We just thought it would be very cool, but obviously that's, a security thing. And there was actually a trip planned. They actually got it cleared. But then before we were able to go, that's when was it KAL was shot down, the passenger airplane. So that, of course, stopped those plans. So I've never been and I never will.
I happened to be in Vladivostok once on a cruise. We were the first cruise line to be in Vladivostok in like 10 years. And so I took a tour. I was scared the whole time I was on their buses. Their military's there. They were already using facial and iris identification. And, here I am, a tourist from South Carolina. I just want to get where I got to go. I was going to China. Good Lord. But yeah, it's scary. Just as good. Stay home. You're okay. You don't need to go there.
I can, there's pictures, I can look on,
That's good.
I can
Yep,
look on Instagram. Yeah.
no doubt. Well, now your time is over with the Navy, and the next stop is Johns Hopkins. What are you doing at Johns Hopkins?
I was doing data processing because there's really not much work for an ex-Russian linguist, but the one thing I did have going for me was a very high level of clearance. So that's you go to Washington, D.C., Maryland, Virginia. That's the land of very high level clearances. So I had a job when I got out of the Navy. I moved from Colorado to Maryland, and I had a job in a week because of that clearance. So I was doing data processing, which I hated. Not a data processing person. Hate that sort of thing. But it came with college benefits. So that's when I started. I started back on my degree. I had started it when I was in the Navy, and it took me 11 years going to college part time, but then I got my degree in art because I knew I wanted to be a graphic artist at Johns Hopkins. When I got in there and I'm doing data processing, hating life, I saw that, oh, they have graphic artists working here and I want to do that. So that's what lit the fire under me to finish that degree. And then I was promoted and I became an artist there.
And then you made that fateful decision to apply for a job at the FBI. Now, this is one of the most amazing stories, friend, when she tells you about her application, the process until she got there. Tell us a little bit about that whole thing, Lisa.
Well, it's not too surprising that I would go to Dunkin' Donuts and on Sunday and read all the newspapers people left behind. And I literally, I got done with the comics. I turn the page and I see this great big FBI seal and it says artist wanted. And, I did like the cartoon double take and I was reading it and I loved my job at Hopkins. I was an artist by then, so I wasn't thinking of leaving. But I was reading the ad and I just thought, I am so totally qualified for all of this. Like everything that they were wanting, all the graphic tools, all the experience. I already had the top secret clearance. The Bureau does another one just to make sure, trust but verify. Um, so I had the college degree, I had the clearance, I had the years of experience working with all the graphic programs that they wanted. I had no trouble going on travel because that's one of the things they ask you, are you willing to travel? And I wasn't going to apply because I didn't think the job was real. It's fairly well known in Washington, D.C., that the best federal positions are usually already filled from the inside, but the agency has to post it to be fair. So, so I didn't think it was real, but I applied anyway. I thought, well, maybe I'll get to see the inside of the FBI. That would be really cool. That would be cool to see what that looks like. So I applied. I heard nothing for months. And then I got a phone call that I made the cut. We did a phone interview, which I thought was just kind of to weed out the riffraff. And it turns out it was the actual real interview. And I'd sent in my portfolio. I actually built a website, sent in my portfolio, and a few days later they told me I had the job.
So then you went right away and went to work.
Ha! So that is, I know, I know. Oh my God. I am nothing if not tenacious. I'll tell you that. It's like uh, a few months after, because they do another security clearance. They just, even though I had one my clearance was a Department of Defense top secret clearance. This was a Department of Justice top secret clearance, but they knew I was a pretty good bet having a clearance since I was 19. So a few months into it, there was a hiring freeze. September 30th, end of the fiscal year, everything came to a stop. Nobody knew it would be over. And so I had already told my supervisor that I was offered a job at the FBI. So the next 3 years, it was like, they said they were going to hire me, but they just have to wait till the hiring freeze is over. And it was finally, I mean, for obvious reasons, I always will remember the day. It was Friday, September 7th, 2001. An agent came to my office, came to Hopkins, and he said the freeze was over. They just had some paperwork to do, but I was as good as in. And he shook my hand and he said, "Welcome to the Bureau." And then, of course, 4 days later was September 11th. And I thought, well, they've got bigger fish to fry. Like, they're not going to bother with me, but they were actually stepping up hiring. So I started less than 2 months later in November of 2001, and I jumped right in to a madhouse of preparing the demonstrative evidence for the prosecution of Zacharias Moussaoui, the 20th hijacker.
Took you around 3 years to get there, but once you got there, you were a key player. Good. Now, one of the stories I found amusing was that you went into the FBI building expecting it to be like TV, and it really isn't like TV. That was a big shock to you, wasn't it?
It, I figured it wasn't going to be like that because, I know how, how TV shows can be. But boy, FBI headquarters was really crumbling. A few years ago, they were trying to get funding. They actually had funding to rebuild it somewhere else, and then that got shot down. So headquarters in DC it's just an old kind of decrepit building. And the graphic department was in the basement of that building. So there were water stains and, rust and a grungy cranberry colored carpet. And yeah, it was not glam at all. But yeah.
When you were working with the FBI, what was the male-female ratio, and was it the same in the forensics department?
I wasn't really aware of any weight one way or the other, like because there's the agents and then there's the support employees. I was a support employee. So the agents make up, and now I'm going to forget my numbers. There are basically 1/4 as many female agents as there are to male agents. And the support staff, it depends on headquarters or a field office. I would say it was about 50, maybe 60/40, more men than women. In my unit, it was like 50/50. The graphic unit, we had like 20 people, and it was pretty much half and half.
Okay. All right. Well, now, early on, you have two people who become your early nemesis. One, I want to make sure I have their names right. One is Randall and one is Brent. Okay, let's talk a little about these because, folks, this book's not just about putting these things together. No. It's about what happened at the FBI office. And you're going to shake your head, you're going to scratch your head and say, what is going on there? No wonder they're not catching anybody in advance. They're too worried about the track. Anyway, tell us a little about Randall and Brent, if you could.
I'm laughing and I shouldn't because it was really terrible. But this one guy, Randall, I'll tell you how I named him. Have you ever seen that? I had to have a little bit of fun when I was giving aliases. So I had to have a little bit of fun because I obviously couldn't use real names. So if you've ever seen the movie Monsters Incorporated, there's a devious purple salamander called Randall Boggs. So that's what this guy reminded me of. Just sneaky and the deal with him, he was just very arrogant, and he was that way towards everybody in the unit. And unfortunately, that supervisor at the time thought he was a genius. He just believed everything he said. And he was just very condescending and rude, not just to me, but to everybody. I tended to speak up about it. Like, don't you speak to me that way. I just thought I'm not putting up with this. So I would never yell or anything like that, but it was just next time you speak to me, please use a civil tone of voice. I would just come right out and say it to him. And the other person, the Brent person, was just one of those. He was just kind of like a storm cloud. He just took offense at a lot of things, and um, he used his. He was a big muscular guy, and he would just intimidate. He would use his physical bulk to kind of intimidate people. He'd get in your face, and he would get angry over things. And what astounded me is that management said, "Oh, well, that's just how he is. That's just how he is." And it's like, that's not right. I mean, he came very close. I won't say he came close to hitting me or anything, but my physical space yelling at me, he was very close, which was terrifying because it just came out of nowhere. And just, it's the FBI is not the only place that just likes to sweep problems under the rug and just, I even had coworkers say, "Lisa, let it go." And I was like, no, I want upper management to do something like, you know, discipline him, do something, put something in his record, um, put him on, unpaid leave for a few days, like something. And they just didn't. It was like, oh, they just kept pushing it aside. And um, he blew up at me several times, several times, and in front of one point in front of somebody, so it couldn't be denied. Um, They just they just didn't do anything about it.
And this is in your forensic art department. This is in
Yes.
so these people are acting like jerks while you're doing a skull or working on a facial something. They're extremely petty. And was it because you were a woman, do you think?
No, that's just who they were, because there were other women in the unit. That's just who they were, their personalities. And let me please say that everybody else in the unit, I worked with great people, but the FBI has their share of troublemakers, just like, or difficult personalities, just like anywhere else. Um, and I don't think it's unusual just to try to ignore those problems. It's not right, but it happens. But no, most of the people I worked with, like my coworkers, I had great coworkers, very knowledgeable. All the FBI agents I worked with, because my job was to work cases for FBI agents or for field offices or for detectives out in the field. Never a problem, always great. There's just some people just can't get along, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, there are. I think if I read this correctly, there are around four major subgroups under forensic artists at the FBI. What are those groupings?
Well, at the graphic unit, okay, there's forensic facial imaging. So that would be composite drawings, like I saw a bad guy and you describe that person to an artist who makes a sketch. That's composite drawing. Age progressions are the bad guy got away. So now you need to do an image of what he may look like after 15 years or 20 years or so. Then there's, postmortem reconstructions. And those are normally drawn or photoshopped. So you would have a morgue photo and you need to reanimate that face to, make it look alive. You can't, some states do, which I think is horrible, but you should not release a photo, an unretouched photo of a corpse to the public. I think that's hideous. So we would retouch those to make them, look alive. And then there's spatial approximation from the skull, which is actually using a skull, either 2D or 3D, to rebuild the face in hopes of recognition. But the forensic facial imaging was just, those four things were just one part of what the graphic unit did. They would also go out, I would go out and do crime scene diagramming. So we'd go out to a scene. Usually the bodies were gone. I never went to a fresh scene. Some others did. So you go out and diagram the scene because you're going to do demonstrative evidence for court. So you need floor plans, scale diagrams. They also started getting into surveying, and then of course with 3D modeling. So that started blowing up after I started.
one of the areas that you worked in and you talk about, which fascinated me, was this age modification of the skulls and the face, and you start talking about earlobes and noses and cheeks, yeah, cheeks and wrinkles. Tell us a bit about that and what goes into that whole making that age modification or whatever it's called.
So for an age progression,
That's it. Yeah.
um, yes. So for age progressions, we usually have a really rotten arrest photo. I mean, you'd think they'd be better quality, but so we usually have, maybe one or two arrest photos. And then what the agent does is they try to we ask them for additional photos of maybe the mother or the father or siblings. So you can see if you can, look for family resemblance and, how the parents are aging and which direction you're going to go. Like, are they living the life drinking a pina colada? Because they had a bank heist, or are they living on the edge? And excuse me. So you look at family photos if you can get them. There's one particular case where man did a horrible murder and the father was protecting him, which disgusted me. So we gather other photos if possible. And then if there was any other information about the fugitive, like maybe they got a tip from somebody that they saw them with, they changed their hair color. One I had was had to do like a ZZ Top beard. So sometimes you get additional information like that, sometimes you don't. And usually those are done for, I would say, like a typical fugitive, done maybe every 5 years or so. It depends. Typically on the anniversary of the crime, because you want to keep it fresh in the public's memory. So you go, okay, 5 years ago today, this person did this and went on the run. So that's what those are for. And, sometimes we can get pretty close with an age progression. I've had a few that were like, it's pretty good, but you can't account for how somebody's going to age. I mean, they could, gain or lose weight. They could have plastic surgery. They could, some just, you spend the life out on the beach and just, it's, it's amazing. It's amazing when you see when you see, um, just the difference in how people can age. Uh, and things like earlobes, that's nothing nobody's gonna really pay attention to, but, like, your earlobes get longer when you age, and your nose tip does too. So, things like that, but we try to accentuate what we already see there. So, if any wrinkles forming the skin, we accentuate those. So, I know there's apps that do age progressions. I've never downloaded one, but, I've seen those, and those actually do a pretty good job. Uh, they're basically taking what an artist could do. So maybe some artists will be mad at me, but it's true. Like if you've seen, some celebrity or, oh, I, ran it through an age progression thing, I don't see too many things that I would do different unless I had specific information from the agent.
Okay. Now, one of the interesting ones, one of the first ones that you working on, was a fugitive named Whitey Bulger. Now, Whitey Bulger, a lot of us know, was from Boston. I think he was involved in the Gardner heist up there somehow. I'm not sure, but he was not the nicest of all persons. And I love the fact that you're so honest and you tell us that everybody was working trying to get a composite and no one really knew what he looked like. That must be very frustrating for you.
Yeah, because we're working off of surveillance photos that, they're taken of him. So they're, old grainy photos. There might have been one or two halfway decent photos of him when he was maybe in his 30s or something. But personally, I don't think, I mean, at least, I would say at least six artists did an age progression of Whitey Bulger. I mean, and not just at the FBI, other artists and other agencies did age progressions of Whitey Bulger. But we're all working from the same photos. And the photos that most of us have, he was younger, thinner, smiling. He's smiling for the camera. And he had a full head of hair, so it looked like he had kind of a long rectangular face. Um, Personally, I don't think that any of us got really close to what he actually looked like because by the time he was caught, He was bald, he had gained weight, so his face went looking from, like, rectangular to square, and he had just obviously, an angry face, just scowling. He was storm clouds, so did not if you looked at one of his younger pictures, in his 30s and smiling, it's a shock to see what he looked like when he was apprehended.
Hmm. So even the best can't sometimes just can't get it quite right, and that
Well, you
happens.
can't you know, you just can't predict some things, like, you could see it, like, when you started comparing and you could see, okay, I can tell it's him if you studied it, but none of us knew that he looked more muscular or stocky and, gained weight and was in, you know, sun, so his skin was more weathered. There's just no way to know.
That's true.
So,
Very true. Well, now,
and actually they got him because of his girlfriend, so it was yeah.
okay, good. Now, moving along in your career here, we go to chapter 8, and you tell a story about you can't tell anybody where you worked or what you're doing. So, what do you tell people you do?
Well, we actually at the FBI, you actually are allowed you are allowed to say, "I work at the FBI." The rules on this are very fuzzy. They don't want you promoting yourself. So they don't want you saying like, buy this because I work at the FBI. They don't want you to trumpet it because it could be a security thing. And like I had a website at one point, just an instructional about forensic art. I didn't put that I work for the FBI on there. Some people did. And and they were allowed to. So it was one of those where they just had kind of fuzzy rules where you can't use it to promote yourself. You're allowed to say you work there, but obviously they don't want you going into great detail or anything. So I personally never put where I worked. Never had it on my social media. I figured what's the point? Yeah, I don't need people looking for me.
Mhm. But at some time, you were telling people that you worked at a candy factory or something, if I'm not mistaken.
That was my fallback position because when I was in the Navy and I worked at the National Security Agency, they were like, "Don't tell anybody you work at NSA and say you work for the government." But if you said you work for the government, then everybody in Maryland would go, "Oh, you must work for NSA." I mean, it was ridiculous to try to deny, if you're, 3 miles from NSA building, like, where do you work? So yeah, sometimes I just go, "I work at a candy store." Yeah, just I know some people when they go on travel, they make up silly things like um I'm thinking of that Seinfeld episode with George, marine biologist, they'll make things up just for fun.
Apparently, you know what all those markings are on top of
Yes,
candies. Wow, that
I used
that
to.
amazes me. You used to. You don't know them anymore. Oh, okay.
There's a few I could probably still tell because I had a couple of favorites. When I worked at Russell Stover as a teenager, the great thing, they were like, "Eat all the candy you want because we want you to be able to describe it to the customer." So they had, like, the seconds where the swirl was a little bit wrong. We could eat as many of those as we wanted. Yeah, it was a great job.
I bet. Yeah, yeah. Well, now, again, you're supposed to not tell anybody where you're working or maybe what department you're, but yet the FBI is publicizing you and pushing you forward as an expert. I think you went on shows or you gave interviews that the FBI wanted you to do. Sort of looks like, wait a minute, I can't, but you're telling everybody where I'm working. That's a little bit of a quandary, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't like being out there. I mean, I'm not a big, huge social media person or anything like that. But, when they say, well, we need somebody to do an interview for the Washington Post. We need somebody to do an interview for America's Most Wanted. And they go, boop, 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 and they point to you. You could say no, but everybody knows, not just the FBI, you don't tell your boss no. So you have to, you have to step up and do it. And I was terrified at first. I got a bit better at it as I got more confident in the work that I was doing. the bad thing with that is exactly what I didn't want to happen is people started contacting me, like, from the outside because they saw me on Dateline, you know, Lisa Bailey, FBI, and then they started calling the FBI. I'm not kidding. I am not kidding. I would get phone calls and emails from people. How can I be a forensic artist? Or they would send scary things. I would go to the security group and go, I just got this crazy email. So, you know, I did not that hard.
We now go to probably the biggest jackass in the building, and his name is Frank. Well, tell us a bit about Frank, because this guy, friends, this guy is the horror of all horror stories. This man, when you read this book and you hear Lisa talk about it, this is as disturbing as it gets. It's upsetting to me, and I know that some people have said to Lisa, "I don't want to hear about discrimination, about this, that, and the next thing." Folks, I don't want to hear it either. But damn it, if it's going on at the FBI, then we need to know about it. That's right. We need to know. And that's why this book by Lisa, not only do we learn about artistry and forensic, we learn about the inner workings. And I'm telling you what, I was appalled as a taxpayer. I apologize to you for what our government did to you. And this jackass, Frank, go ahead. Just tell us about Frank because he's a winner.
Well, I should I'm laughing just because I'm away from it now. Trust me, it was I mean, it was the worst experience of my life. I had never experienced anything like that before. And it all came through a reorganization. So I was in the graphic unit with reasonable human supervisors, you know, that were fine. And then I was transferred, myself and others. There was a big reorganization, and we were transferred into the photo unit. And by the way, these are not real names of units. So I'm not, probably wouldn't be a problem, but just to be safe. Um, this guy, Frank, he had a reputation for being very difficult, and the the rumors were true. I think he fancied himself, you know, just a genius that is just smarter than everybody else and a bully that had a chip on his shoulder. And, you know, myself and my coworkers, because, you know, they got some abuse from him. When I say abuse, they got abuse from him too. They were condescended to. I was the senior female artist. Um, so the men, like they had their trouble with him too, but not as much as me. Like he knew when to back down with the guys because well, number one, they never would, but he knew that they could take him down if they needed to. But he was just very condescending and snide to women. And it wasn't just me. There were other women in other positions, photographers and, you know, administrative specialists. And I never spoke, I never like talked back because you can get into trouble. Like if you say some, you know, if you come away with like a smart ass comment, but I would stand up for myself. Like this was not in the book. There was one very hostile meeting, and he was saying things that were he was accusing me of things that were just absolutely not true, and I had proof in databases to prove in emails. And he's saying these things to me, and he turns to me and he goes, "Are you accusing me of lying?" Because he was hoping I would come back. And I just looked at him. I said, "I'm saying you're mistaken." He did not like he did not like any of that, and I was you know, I come from the military, and I was you know, I know the chain of command, and I was always very respectful and everything, but he just I just I some people are just mean. I he took pleasure. He's kinda like, you know, pull the people the person that pulls wings off flies, just I don't understand why.
But he wasn't like that when he was working with you. That's what I was getting, that when he and you were
Well, they're
working
just different.
together, oh, they're two different ones.
Yeah, so, yes. So, Harry used to be a coworker, and he was always pleasant. But then when he was promoted to, like, just a supervisor. So a GS-14. So he was my direct supervisor, Harry was. And then Frank was the unit chief over all of us and over Harry. And some people said, oh, Frank turned Harry into a monster because Harry just became like Frank. And I'm of the opinion it's like, I think that's in somebody and it's just released, that does somebody turn that quickly? Because our immediate supervisor, yeah, we had all worked with him. We had gone out on scenes together. He was a pleasant guy, all that. And then he gets promoted over us. And then we go into this new unit where Frank is, frankly, a tyrant. And then this Harry started following suit and just took after him, like absorbed his personality. It was the oddest thing. It was shocking because it was like, we used to work together. Like, we're good artists. We used to work together. Why are you acting this way? Um, One time he kind of gave himself away. He he was accusing us of not listening to him, which was not true. It's just something he was saying made absolutely no sense at all. So it was like an impossible thing. And he's actually said, when my dad said something, people listened. And we all went back and went, well, we're not your children. It was, and I almost can't blame them as much as I blame the upper management for not reining them in. So I know, like when I worked at Hopkins, I never had anything of the sort like that. Um, so I don't know. It's one of those things that not just at the FBI that management seems to circle wagons. And you would hope that it wouldn't happen at the Bureau. You would hope it wouldn't because they are, to enforce the laws. But some of the upper management, at least where I was at the laboratory, I can't speak for all divisions, so I'm not denigrating any other division or field office. But at that point in the laboratory, the front office just would not rein them in, would not do anything. And is it because, well, maybe they got good performance evals before, and then now you have to do something about it, and now you're giving them a problem. They don't want to deal with the problem. So they just, try to make it go away. And the easiest thing to make go away is a support employee, So that's they circle the wagons for management, and the support employees are left to twist in the wind.
Well, now you go down to Bogota. You're assigned to go down to Bogota. You're given like 4 hours notice. You got to go to Bogota, and it's like, oh my God, I got to get there. Boom, 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 boom. You finally make it down there. Now, who is the person? Now, this friend, this is how petty people are. They know she's in Bogota, and now who's calling you all the time, and why are they calling you? Frank. Frank is calling you for what reasons?
What are you doing? Why are you there so long? I was supposed to go. The reason I went was to do if they had any need for a composite sketch. So when something this major, it was the murder of a DEA agent. When something that big happens, the federal government, man, they send every resource possible. So if they think they might need somebody, they have them there. They don't have to call them in. So uh, I was sent down there. I got notification on Friday night, and I was actually 6 a.m. the next morning. I was on a plane, which is fine. But I was there to do composite sketches of any of the suspects. And they thought, well, she'll be there like overnight, a day or two. Well, it didn't turn out that way. They had developed other leads. They didn't need me for a composite. I said this in the book. Like at one point, the legal attaché, the man in charge, said, "Well, we don't need you for a sketch. You can go back to the hotel and relax." I was like, "Well, I don't want to sit around a hotel." It's like, "Well, put me to work. Like I'll do something." So I ended up, it was basically a gopher running around, like writing charts, doing just basically administrative stuff, like recalling my data processing days. But it was like, I don't want to sit in a hotel, so I will help. And Frank just, this isn't an embassy with fences and fences and more fences and guns, and you can't just pick up the phone and call the States. And I had a BlackBerry, And Frank just kept pinging me, emailing me, and texting me, "What are you doing? Why are you still there?" Like the second, third day. And there was no reason for him to do that because on one of these huge deployments, the information goes from the top down. So the director of the FBI, the director of the FBI laboratory, the person under that, it's all, and everybody knows what's going on with the team that's there. So you are not required to check in every day because you're busy. And he just, every time he'd ping me, it was like, how am I going to call back? You try to get to the one spot in the room that you can pick up a signal. And literally people were saying, why does he keep bugging you? And I couldn't say, because he's a jerk. You're not allowed to say anything bad about your secret. You're not allowed to say anything bad about another employee. You're not allowed to say anything like that. And the managers at the embassy were getting angry because they saw that I was trying to help and work, and I kept getting interrupted. And they were saying like, "What's his problem?" And I'm just like, I can't speak. I can't. So one time, the one of the big bosses at the embassy was, we were talking, and my BlackBerry pinged, and I just went, and I went, I said, "It's my boss." And he took the BlackBerry out of my hand and went, said it. And that stopped him for a while because it wasn't written in my tone. Even though it came from my BlackBerry, it was obvious somebody else was doing the typing. So, um, it didn't stop him, but I guess he thought I was having, I don't know. It was just, you can't explain some people. You can't explain. It was trying to see if I was doing something wrong. I don't know, but I was down there working.
No matter what you did, you couldn't please Frank, I'll tell you.
It's one of those things where, you know, myself and the other artists that, were transferred into the photo unit, we were all really good employees. We were hard workers. We, all the supervisors had to do was literally give us a job and we'll do it. And we'll make you look good because you don't need to manage us. Like we're adults. Um, he just both of them, I can't explain it. Like I said, I only laugh now because it's just the ridiculousness of it, and that got him away from it. Um, it was inexplicable.
Yep.
Yep.
Well, now, one of the things that I gathered as I read this book is the amount of knowledge you need to have as an art, in anatomy, physiology. You need to know so much about when you start doing compositions and age progressions and everything else. Th- that's an amazing amount of information and learning you had to have. Did you have all that, or were you getting some of that along the way?
I didn't have the facial anatomy knowledge before. Basically, the skills that I had learned throughout being like a graphic artist, like Photoshop, retouching, all those mechanical skills, like I could retouch somebody's face on another person's body and do that seamlessly. And I could do that at my previous job. That comes in handy for doing age progressions and being able to, kind of cheat some photos and everything. But the when I found out about facial approximation at the FBI, I didn't know I'd be doing that when I was hired because it was a junior position. Then it was just like, I'm going to learn everything there is, anything I can learn about the face, I'll memorize the bones, I'll memorize the muscles, I'll know where the insertion points are, I'll just made myself learn it.
You need to know a lot about anatomy and the face when you're doing all this stuff, and it just is amazing to me.
I just want to make one point quickly in case it doesn't come up later, is that on the facial approximations, I always worked with an anthropologist. That's one thing that's kind of that I wish was more standard. It should be standard. It should be standard that in a facial approximation, it is an artist and an anthropologist collaborating on the case, period. I know that there are artists doing them on their own, and I hope their heart is in the right place, but they really should have the knowledge of an anthropologist. They are they have PhDs. They know the votes. Like they're the ones that write the report. I could not begin sculpting until they give me the information about the remains, the age, the sex, the stature. I couldn't do a thing. So we always worked with the anthropologist. So it's bringing two sets of knowledge together.
Okay. Now, two more questions. Just two more. I don't want to take any more of your time. First of all, what was the final straw? You went through all sorts of hearings and reviews, and you went up the chain with these problems and complaints. But what was the final straw that made you say, you know what, I've had it. I'm packing it in? What'd they do?
I knew they were coming after my clearance. And I couldn't go into all this detail in the book, but I had a special designation. Like I had a top secret clearance, but I also had an additional designation that was not necessary for my job. And so that I don't want to get into the weeds. I don't want to get into the weeds there. I was required to keep a level of clearance that was not necessary. And with that, they insisted I take a polygraph. And it's like, but I don't need this level of clearance. I should be downgraded. And that's just security 101. But Frank kept insisting that I had to take the polygraph, even though none of the work, a woman who works on skulls does not need that level of clearance. There are different designations just besides top secret. So um, uh, I knew that I felt it in my bones that they were coming after my clearance because um, they made false accusations against me. They started an investigation against me, and which could have gotten me dismissed. I was not guilty of the offense, but I was still suspended for 2 days. Uh, that's based on somehow the supervisor that discriminated against me was allowed to write the recommendation for my punishment in the investigation that was made up. I mean, you
Can't
can't
win
make
there,
these
can
things
you?
up.
Yep. You know you're going to lose that one. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, wait, he's writing the opinion? So with that, it was just so ludicrous. And what I knew when I retired, I was never going to do forensic artwork again. I didn't need a clearance. I had no need, I would not let them take my clearance because by God, it was just the principle of the thing. I had a clearance since I was 19. You will not humiliate me. You will not walk me out of this building. I refuse.
Good for you.
And so it's like I gave my 2 weeks. And at that point, I was in a new unit with a wonderful supervisor who I call Melanie. She was wonderful. And funnily enough, under her, she praised me to the skies, to the front office, and gave me outstanding performance reviews. And Lisa's a total pleasure to work with. So you know, um, it was just crazy. But it's so at that point, and thank goodness, um, due to circumstances, there was some opportunities my husband had in LA, things like that. I told my supervisor, Melanie, the kind one, I said, you know what? I may end up leaving earlier. This was before any thought of the polygraph or anything. Uh, said my husband has some business opportunities, and I think I'm going to stay a few more years, but I may retire earlier than that. And I don't know how much notice I'll have, but if my husband gets his job opportunity, I'll be leaving. And I said, but I will at least give you 2 weeks' notice. And as it turned out of the blue, it was that when I came home from the polygraph, I talked to my husband and I said, I'm putting in my 2 weeks because I know what they're up to. They didn't fail me. They said, what was I should know, indeterminate. It was inconclusive. So they couldn't tell if I was a spy or not. They couldn't tell if I was.
A lot of spying working on those skulls, I'll tell you. Well, now you're over in Portugal now, and tell us what's next for Lisa Bailey? Are you gonna write another book? Are you gonna maybe write a novel? Or gonna write? Gonna do some artwork? Gonna do some sculpting? What are you gonna do? Tell us about your life.
yes to artwork, anything that's not death or skulls. Um, I I do not consider myself a writer, even though I wrote a book I'm pretty proud of. Like I'm really happy with how the book came out. But that was, my voice, all that. Uh, I I am drawing. I am trying to teach myself how to oil paint. I I like silly things and happy things. I'm trying to paint my cat. My So I'm trying to do a painting of her, and it's nothing that I want to share on social media. I thought about it. I thought, well, maybe I should like do a sketchbook thing. It's like I don't need to see it. I just want to know that I can do it. I literally, at this point, I have absolutely no interest in showing artwork. I'll do it for myself, for my friends, for my family. I've got a house to decorate, so I've got paintings I can paint and put up on the walls. Um, yeah, I'm just kind of I
Living it
just wanna,
life.
I just wanna live life. And if I can one thing I wanna point out with the book that, it's very clear when you read the synopsis, like, this is what's going on. And just in case anybody I know people are triggered by harassment and discrimination, things like that. Um, but it really is a problem that a lot of women in the sciences especially, even though, like facial approximation, it's art and science, but still I worked in a forensic laboratory. It's a big problem, and it would have been really disingenuous of me, to use a big word, to write just, "Oh, I did this and I did that and I did all these cool things at the FBI," and not say what happened. Like, to leave that out, I think would be a disservice, because it's like at some point you have to decide, do I love my job enough to stay and fight, or am I gonna quit? And for me, the FBI is the only agency that has facial approximation as a program, as a defined program with full-time artists. So I'd felt, if for nothing else, not just getting it off my chest and being cathartic, but other women need to know that they may need to make a choice. And for the first 9 years of my FBI career, I was, there were some hiccups, but I was loving life. I mean, the Randall guy, like people just be how they're going to be, but things were great. Things were great. But just people need to know it's still out there. It's still out there. So I don't want anybody to, it's not an angry missive or anything. And I do have a lot in there about the job. Oh, this is the other thing I wanted to say, that it should never come to like you're getting rid of people that know their job and love it. Like how is this possible? It's doing a disservice to victims, because here is somebody who loved their job, was giving everything they had to it, and then you're going to do this? I mean, it's just ridiculous. Just it should never happen.
Yeah,
So,
I concur. Well, I appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much for coming on today for Books and Looks. I love the book. Like I said, if there's such an award for cover of the year, this book should be getting the cover of the year. I love this thing. So thank you so much, Lisa, for coming on.
thank you. Thank you so much.
All right, friends. Well, I hope you enjoyed that interview as much as I did. We have learned a lot. And friends, as I said in the introduction, please, please, please take a look at this book. It's going to be in bookstores. It's going to be in your library. Read this. It's both about her life and what goes on behind the scenes at the FBI. There's some remarkable people who do remarkable work. Unfortunately, there's some morons who sit there and create problems. That I don't know why they do things, but to create problems. And they like to be bosses. In fact, you can get the one story where a person sits there and looks out the window with binoculars to make sure people are coming in at the exact time they're supposed to come in. Come on. If you get down to that pettiness, I don't want to read about it. That's what I'm looking at. I'm looking at what's going on out there. What are we doing with our money, our agencies, everything else makes me shake my head. I got to be honest with you. And this one got me very upset at what went on. Again, as a taxpayer, it peeves me. Okay, it peeves me. So anyway, hey, listen. On behalf of my website, viewsonbooks.com, on behalf of my good friends at Podcast Studio X, this is Blaine DeSantis for Books and Looks, saying may all your leaves be pages in a book.